Hey there, Reece here. Thanks for joining me on the season premiere of Communication Breakdown. This week I'm talking to Derek Shulman, one of the founding members and the lead singer of the band Gentle Giant, one of the most influential bands on the prog rock movement as a whole. Known for their multi-instrumental talents, complex melodies and baroque influences, Gentle Giant stated that their aim was to expand the frontiers of contemporary popular music at the risk of becoming very unpopular. And whilst not breaking huge commercial success, they did gain a cult following. They're one of these bands that are held in really high regard in the prog rock genre. Derek joined me from New York City to talk about the band and his own solo career in the music industry. How you doing? You okay?
I'm doing okay, considering we're under lockdown here, and it's been weird for everyone, but thankfully we're all safe and healthy and just basically bored out of our minds. Being in not isolation, but being in having cabin fever, if you like, not able to really do much, not much going on in the music business except for the digital stuff and all that stuff. So it's really
right.
Thankfully, we're okay. So everything's in that respect, everything's fine. How about you guys?
Yeah, we're okay. I'm just with Ben. He's my housemate. You probably won't be able to see him, but he's doing my video and my audio checks today.
Very good.
But yeah, we've just sort of been locked in trying to come up with new ideas and things. I've been working from home as well.
That everyone has.
Conference calls and things. Yeah, so yeah, it's just a bit different. But we're sort of easing lockdown next week, I think. So
who knew when you said Happy New Year that it was going to be a
yeah, what a year.
What a year it's been so far, and it's going to continue, unfortunately.
So so I just wondered, growing up, was there much music in the house? I've read that your dad was an army musician turned jazz trumpeter.
Oh yeah, music was absolutely in the house. It was I was born in Glasgow, but my family moved down from Glasgow when I was about 1.5 years, 2 years old, to Portsmouth in England. And yes, he was a musician. He was a dance band / jazz band leader, and he was a trumpet player. And during the period in the 50s and early 60s, that's what he did. And the music was always around. His friends were musicians, and there was instruments everywhere. So music was everywhere, and that was our upbringing, effectively. I mean, even though we went to school and all the other stuff, and other people did other things, music was around the house, and musician friends of his were always around the house after gigs in the morning, like 2 or 3 in the morning. They come by and literally jam in the middle of the night, just because they loved it so much. So it was a part of my brother's background and upbringing, basically.
Right. Interesting. So, did you learn instruments as kids as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Ray was my brother Ray was a classically trained violinist, actually.
Right.
My brother Phil, who's a lot older than me, he plays trumpet, and then I played sax, bass. And we all learned instruments, and read instruments, but also we played different things because my father was also a multi-instrumentalist also. He played trumpet, but he also could play clarinet, sax, and even the bagpipes, which is, if you've ever heard a bagpipe being played in a very small room in Portsmouth, that's louder than Motorhead on their highest, high decibel day, basically. So music was everywhere.
So it's quite interesting to hear that there was sort of a lot of classical instruments. Do you think that sort of led you to, when you guys got together in the band, to put those instruments in there?
I think that what we did was utilize whatever our knowledge was, playing instruments, but also, I'm talking about me and my brothers, but actually putting the band together and the different members had different backgrounds. My background and the brothers' background was before Gentle Giant, was in the mid to late 60s when I was at school, grammar school. and I started a group called Simon Dupree and the Big Sound. People your age wouldn't even know about it, but occasionally when I'm over in England, which is I can't get over right now, you'd hear a song called Kites.
Yeah.
And that was a top 10 number one single in 1960, the summer of 67, and I was still I was in the sixth form of grammar school at that point, and my brother Ray was in the fifth form, and having been brought up and having had a hit single, if you like, a hit group during those period, prepared us for the next, what we were going to do next, and that became Gentle Giant. But again, my background, I loved R&B music and soul music. My brother Phil loved modern jazz, and Ray was more of a classical music kind of person. So effectively, we came from different areas of our love of what kind of music, but we enjoyed all kinds. Getting the different members together in 1969-70, should I say, 1970, was also a part of what Gentle Giant became. Kerry Manier, the keyboard player, was absolutely probably the most important member to find because he was classically trained also, and he had a degree in composition from the Royal Academy of Music.
Right.
So his mind and mindset was very much classically trained. And Gary Green, the guitarist, was very much a blueser.
Right.
So all of these mixes of kinds of music and different elements of our loves and backgrounds melted together, if you like, to form whatever Gentle Giant was. Is
it true that you, when you were Simon Dupree and the Big Sound, you got Elton John to play keyboards, and you once featured Dudley Moore on vocals?
Yeah, Elton. Yeah, so it's all true. Elton, in fact, Reg, as he was at that time, he depped actually for our keyboard, who was out sick for quite a period of time in the about 68, 67, 68, 69, when he was just changing his name from Reg Dwight to Elton John. Right. And me and my brother Ray became good friends with him, and Bertie. We were there when he met Bertie from when he came down from Lincoln. And Reg was our keyboard player, and we loved playing with him. He loved playing with us, and in fact, we whispered in his ear that we were deciding we wanted to break up and do something new, something different, which is not what Simon Dupree and the Big Sound was. We were kind of stymied in the pop world and kind of like wanted to progress our musical horizons, if you like. It sounds very trite and bullshitty, but it was true. And Elton, or Reg at the time, said, "Boy, I'd love to hear what you're doing." And I got some songs that I've been writing with Bernie. Maybe I could contribute and maybe even be part of it. And me and Ray went up to Watford, wherever he was living in, near Watford, and I can't remember where it was, his house, and we became friends, and he played, things like Skyline Pigeon and all that stuff, and we said, "That's great, Reg, that's really cool." And then me and Ray took the train back and said, "Nah, not for us." Thank God for him. So, but we remained friends, and in fact we were there at the first, when he was doing his first couple of albums in the studio with Gus Dudgeon and everyone else. So yeah, he was part of it. And in fact, I saw him last year when he was doing his solo show, and in fact I got a song that he gave us. This is Simon Dupree, that we recorded, and he forgot about it, and I gave him his demo that he hadn't heard since 1967, 68. So yeah. Amazing. And Dudley Moore played on several sessions of ours towards the end of our Simon Dupree career, if you like.
Right.
Great guy. So yeah, we were, during that period, it's hard to describe, especially someone who's young and knows all about these kind of classic old fart bands like we are. In those days, it was everyone knew each other, and it was really a kind of a brotherhood, if you like, because it was really. There was a ton of venues to play, but we used to know all these bands, and we used to gather in this little. There was a restaurant or truck stop, if you like, they call it here, at the Blue Boar in the Birmingham N1, and all the bands used to congregate there after a gig, and we all used to get together and say, where were you tonight to Pink Floyd or the Who or the Idol race, which became ELO, etc., and we were friends, and anyone who made it and could make it, we were very happy for.
Yeah, I was listening to a few of the Simon Dupree tracks. I was trying to get a gist of if they sounded like sort of what people recognised as Gentle Giant music, and I came across a great song, "We Are Moles."
Well, that was an interesting period actually, because that was a period when we were really getting to be, how can I put this, bored. And bored with being Simon Dupree and the Big Sound, because we were back as Simon Dupree and the Big Sound during that period of time. We'd actually gathered a very big following in Europe, actually.
Right.
And having a big hit single was kind of a millstone round our necks, because suddenly we were thrust into a circuit which is a Scampi and Chip circuit, if you like, up in Stockton, and people sitting there and having their beers and then Dave D goes on for a few songs, and then Simon Dupree goes on, and that was something we hated every second of it. So we decided to do something really crazy, and we did this thing called "We Are the Moles." It was just my brothers and myself. Mm-hmm. That was just us. And in fact, people thought it was the Beatles, as you probably have read about. And it was actually doing very well. I mean, it started hitting the charts, and we said, great, this is exactly what we wanted to go. And unfortunately, a gentleman named Syd Barrett, who was a member of Pink Floyd, mm-hmm. he was there at the studio during the time we were doing it. Right. And he basically blew the whistle on us and said, it's not the Beatles, it's Simon Dupree. You don't want to listen to this bullshit. Wow. So he basically outed us. And so that it went up like that, and it sunk down like a stone. So Syd Barrett, rest in peace. But he was not a friend after that when he outed us.
Shortly after that time, so you sort of grew sick of the sort of, like you called it, the Scampi and Chips circuit. So is that what made you sort of reach out to Gary and Kerry and Martin? Were you trying to get a different sound completely, or?
Yeah, well, actually, we didn't honestly know quite what we were going to be, to tell you the truth. All we knew is we didn't want to be what we were. Right. And we were lucky enough to have a manager who believed in us musically. This is the brothers, it's Shulman brothers, if you like. And we said, we want to break the Simon Dupree up, and we want to find new musicians to start something brand new. And who knows where it's going to go, but we knew that we wanted to expand. It sounds trite and trivial, but it's the truth. Expand our horizons musically, because we were stymied in the pop world, and that was awful to me especially. It got me very depressed and everything else. So we were lucky enough to have someone fund our 6 to 9 months of finding Kerry, Gary, Martin, and recruiting them as members, and finding where and what we were. And they came in with their ideas, Kerry especially, on his compositional aspect. And it basically drew brothers, myself, Ray, and Phil as well, out much more as musicians who had something to say, if you like, from back in the day. So, yes, it did. It really was something which, again, we didn't quite know where it was going to go, but we all came from different worlds. And, I've said this before, so if it sounds very familiar to people who are listening to you, it was like a stew, and you put it in a funnel, a stew of musicians and musicians' backgrounds, and put it in a funnel, and out dripped Gentle Giant. And that's exactly what it was. I think it was, the first album, the first couple of albums, we were kind of finding our way, but we knew it was the 180 from where we were as Simon Dupree. Right.
And where did the name Gentle Giant come from?
It actually came from the management, to tell you the truth.
Oh, really?
Someone who was working with him, with Jerry Braun, who was a manager actually, and checking up to make sure he'd come down to rehearsals every few weeks to make sure we weren't wasting his money and going, slacking off and having beers nonstop all night. He said, what are you guys going to call yourself? And we said, I don't know, what do you think? He said, well, your music's heavy, but it's also has intricacy, so why not Gentle Giant? He said, whatever you think, you're the guys paying the bills. So it stuck.
So the first album, I mean, as a sort of debut album, it's a very strong one with like several iconic songs, Funny Ways, Nothing at All, even like A La Carte is a banger. How do you come up with these songs? Were they leftovers from ideas you'd had in the Simon Dupree days, or were they completely original?
No, completely original. This is the period of time when we had that time to rehearse, to recruit. Kerry was an incredible influence on us. If you like, to make us to bring out the musicality that we had from our past experiences as growing up. And so these pieces were written during that period of time, and that was effectively our first stage show, and we played in the late 1970s, 1970 should I say, but that was the first lot of songs that we put together as a band. Well, certainly Kerry, myself, and Ray, and Phil occasionally, and. Really, that was the beginning, the birth of a realization. That's the first song in Giant, and that really wasn't what it was. It wasn't stuff left over from anything in particular. It was just what we were and who we were in the rehearsals and coming up with ideas and putting them together and then recording them with a fantastic producer called Tony Visconti.
Yeah,
and it was a fantastic experience.
So speaking to some other bands from the time, they seem to have this sort of, I don't know whether this is how it is with prog rock or not, but this sort of jam approach where they sort of come up with a basic idea and then have a few jam sessions, and then out of those comes sort of a more experimental song. I just wondered if you guys had the same thing, or whether some guys went away and wrote things and then presented it as a sort of, this is my song and I'd like your input on this.
No, we're absolutely not a jam band.
You were not.
Absolutely not. No. Yes, we were. Let me put that in perspective. When there was a solo to be put down or on stage, we would have that solo. Whoever it was, a keyboard solo, sax solo, a guitar solo, behind a rhythmic theme. But in general, writing the material was done. Certainly Ray and Kerry were the main, if you like, musician songwriters who came up with the music, and I would occasionally, Ray probably more about 30%, Kerry about 40%, and me about 15-20%, and come up with the pieces that were written, and a lot of things were scored actually,
right?
Literally scored on so it was stuff done, scored, and we were quite precise. I mean, we were far from a jam band.
Right.
That's not what we were. We were very tight and musical and very much orchestrated, if you like. Mm-hmm. So the music you hear in Gentle Giant generally, and I think it goes from album 1 to the very last album, you'll hear pieces of music, and I won't call them songs, as some of them are not really songs, but you'll hear themes in the pieces of music, which are kind of, and again, I don't want to sound pretentious for the sake of it, as one of our album titles, or pompous, but they're thematic, and that's kind of a classical mode of music, and Kerry was very much into counterpoint and contrapuntal music, which is kind of interesting. It surprises people. We love to surprise people. And that's what we did. So really, to answer your question, no, we were not a jam band at all. That's not what we were, and didn't want to be that.
Right. So around this time, what are you guys listening to?
Well, classical music was, on the agenda because we were all raised on classical music, jazz as well. And I loved great pop. I mean, it was everything. I mean, honestly, we were influenced by everyone. But I think, if you like, certainly mine and I think Ray's influences were Frank Zappa,
Right.
Miles Davis, Kerry Moore, John Cage, and Michael Tippett, did more in the classical world. And I loved ABBA, and I loved song. Yeah, of course. I mean, and the Monkees, they're fantastic melodies. So what it's everything. But it was really my first love, if you like, during that period of time was what Frank Zappa did with what he was able to do and make something intriguing, interesting, and jazzy, but still very I won't use the word commercial, but certainly listenable. And actually, one other artist I have to mention, and this came from a question you asked me before, was an artist that Reg Dwight mentioned to us when he was in the band. And by the way, was a very important influence on a lot of these English bands at the time, was a band called Spirit out of California. Right. He said to us when he was in the band, "Man, have you heard of this band Spirit?" I said, "No." He said, "Wow, you should listen to them. They got some fantastic riffs and very kind of unique way of doing things." And we listened to Spirit, actually, and thought, wow, they were doing interesting things. Believe it or not, a lot of other bands, if you ever read interviews or even get the chance to interview bands like Led Zeppelin or Deep Purple or whatever, they all listened to Spirit and ripped off their stuff big time. Right. And we did a little bit, to tell you the truth. Listen, when in doubt, steal.
Great advice. Yeah. So yeah, I just want to talk about the sort of I want to say almost medieval sound. I think I've read some people call it that, some sort of Renaissance sound of Gentle Giant, especially songs like I was listening to Freehand the other day, and the song Talibond is it's sort of just like a medieval sort of tune that would be played at some sort of like a jester has come into the king's court or something. I think it is partly to do with the way the vocals sort of overlay and the use of strings and horns. Do you think this was sort of in part to give yourself a sort of uniqueness?
I think yeah. That was Kerry's influence. Kerry was very much he loved medieval music. His real love was really the 15th century, 16th century music, which is kind of interesting. And he loved. I mean, I mentioned the sort of John Cages of the world, but his true love was medieval. Rondos and fugues and everything else. So that was more of his influence, and he loved that, and he influenced us to enjoy that kind of music too. And that was something that the band did individually to each other, for each other. The band actually, as an entity, was put together, and when we rehearsed, we tried to impress and make each other better, better musicians for each other first. Again, it's probably selfish, and we were very much cocoon, but we loved to make ourselves better musicians and make better music for each other, and challenge each other to make it as interesting and as musical as it could be. Hopefully, and then we take it on stage, and hopefully one or two people would enjoy it too, and then we become a real band. But that was our first challenge, if you like, to challenge each other.
I mean, that must have definitely spearheaded you on to sort of get a bit more complex and advanced, to even just to wow each other, really. Yeah,
effectively, yeah. And, and to be able to do things that we never even thought we could do or wanted to do. And again, we had no let's be like so and so, let's be like this band here, let's try and do this. It was a period of time when a lot of these bands were just developing, and we were just developing as well. I mean, the first album to the fourth or fifth album, where there was a band has a lifetime, and you're born, you have an adolescence, you're an adult, you get older, and then you get you're dead. So and then you continue to be a dead band, or walking, if you like. And a lot of bands of that era have continued to do that. I won't name them who they are, but that's like a lifespan of anything.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm being a little glib here.
No, it's very fine. So yeah, I just want to talk about a few of the albums specifically. So Three Friends, it was the first sort of concept album. Whose idea was it to sort of come up with a full concept that would spread across a whole album?
I think it was probably Phil first and myself. I mean, we did the lyrics, and we decided that Phil. We decided to think about a concept. I mean, it sounds kind of pretentious to even talk about that in this day and age. But this is a day of albums, and people would listen to the whole thing on an LP. Which people today now listen today and see an LP and think, wow, what's that? But that's all we had in those days. Really, it was about three friends who were together in school, and you're all in it together, and they go their separate ways. And when you get older and your lives are changing, and even though you're close at school, and you're all part and parcel of one family, the family spreads and breaks apart and doesn't ever come back to being a family anymore. So it really is. It's not really a concept, but it's a concept about the people, kids in school and their ways of life. And someone becomes a banker, someone becomes an artisan, and someone becomes a bricklayer or whatever it is. But when you're younger, you're all the same thing. You're all part and parcel of, being in school together. So it was a comment, not essentially a concept, if you like.
Right. For me, from that album, I think Peel the Paint definitely stands out. And I think it sort of goes back to what you were saying earlier on about, you do get this sense that it is a very precise song. It definitely does feel like a song that was written and rehearsed very, very thoroughly. And especially, Malcolm's sort of drumming is so varied in the background too. Did everyone sort of have the freedom to experiment and sort of try sort of, a different drum beat for each sort of section?
That's an interesting question. I'm trying to think about the album itself. I think most of the album was written and quite precise going in. One thing we did a lot of when we were on the road and recording, we rehearsed. We rehearsed and we rehearsed and we rehearsed. That's something we did because we wanted to do it, and again challenging ourselves and to make sure that we presented ourselves on a live basis as well as we could. But to answer your question, there was a couple of times on the Three Friends album, and I'm trying to think, when there was a guitar solo, and that was pretty much with Malcolm playing drums and a guitar solo, and I can't remember what song it was. It probably was Peel the Paint, a drum and guitar thing, and that was one of the very few times that was a jam. I mean, it wasn't a jam exactly that, exactly a jam. Let's go in and play whatever we want. But it was because it was a period, it was a time frame and a few X number of bars to get it done. However, that was one of the very few times that the band jammed, if you like, and that was and it kind of worked in its a crazy way.
It's definitely one of my favorites. I think that bit does feel quite loose but almost like the guitar and the drum are sort of trying to sort of outshine each other in that moment. They're sort of both building up.
Well, again, yes, you're right, and that was part of what we wanted to do. Had you had had you been born 50 years before, or I don't know how old you are, but 40 years before, or whatever it is, one thing we did at live, was we didn't jam per se, but we were a lot looser. We never took we played our songs or the music that we had on our albums, but we stretched them out and did different things. So effectively, what we had on the album was a sketch for the painting we took on stage, if that makes any sense. So that, for instance, Peel the Paint, we do different things during the song that you would not hear on the album. We love to surprise people on stage. We didn't, put our heads down and say, okay, here's the next song, and it sounds exactly like the album. We wanted to entertain. we wanted a surprise, and we wanted a shock, and we also wanted to enjoy ourselves. And in enjoying ourselves, wanted the audience to enjoy themselves. And we smiled on stage. We weren't ultra serious classical musicians. We said, hey, come on, enjoy yourself. This is fun. So so that to answer the question about your question about jamming, we didn't jam on stage, but we certainly lengthened and did very very different things that were not on the albums that were recorded, but they were certainly rehearsed and done in a way that were done in the way that we wanted and rehearsed. But again, it was done with a sense of humor and or a sense of self-deprecation, if you like. And that's why we never became that popular.
Just on touring, I read that at one time you guys got paired to tour with Black Sabbath.
Yeah, our first American tour.
How did that go?
What can you imagine? Every night we went on, we were booed off the stage. I mean, it was. But we had the same manager, and he said, "I've got your American tour," and he said, "You're with Black Sabbath." We knew Sabbath, very well because we had the same manager, and they're great guys. I mean, they were a lot of fun to be around. But Sabbath were huge at that time. They were just become massive, and no one knew Gentle Giant. So we'd land in Charlotte, North Carolina, and as soon as we hit the stage, the boos went up. We were not even a note played, and everyone said, "Get off, you suck!" And we hadn't even played a note.
Wow.
But it was a very interesting tour, but one which was a tough one to do. But it was hardcore. It ended up at the Hollywood Bowl, which I think a lot of people know about. Fans of our band, certainly, where we were booed off, or we were booed all during the set. I think you probably know this story, and I've repeated it many times. Joel, during the set, this was the last show of the tour, someone threw a cherry bomb, a big banger, a firework, on stage, and it exploded in front of me and Phil. And we were just getting into the cello violin thing. And having been sort of harassed all during the set, you do something that the band should never do. We stopped the band and said, stop. And I was really upset. I said, hey, you guys, this is bullshit. You stop this. Unfortunately, my elder brother, Phil, came up with language which is a little stronger. And if you don't mind me repeating it, he said, hey, guys, you're a bunch of cunts. And the boo that went up was extraordinary.
Wow.
So, that didn't bode well for an LA crowd. So we were booed the rest of the show. We got the hell out of LA as quick as we could and never went back for a couple of years. But at the same time, Sabbath were hilarious too because they were whacked out themselves. I mean, to be perfectly honest. And we saw the band from the side of the stage. Again, it's a story which I've told a couple of other people. And I remember in the middle of, I think, War Pigs, Tony Iommi was standing up and he went flat in his face and his guitar fed back and the crowd went apeshit. They thought it was amazing. But Tony didn't get up. And,
oh, God.
And the feedback was still going. And
maybe that's what you should have done.
Oh, yeah. Maybe we should have either gone flat on our faces, but we just got booed off the stage, that's all.
Right, I want to talk a little bit about Octopus. For me, this is probably like one of the most, I don't know how, but complete Gentle Giant albums. I think Ray said that it's probably his favourite album, minus Acquiring the Taste, I think. And apparently the concept started as you all writing a song that each member sort of would have as their own song. Did this sort of come through? And which one would be your song?
That was the idea. That was the sort of, again, concept. Ultimately, we realized it wasn't a concept at all. So I mean, I don't think that, I think that it just became an album of 8 songs and it was called Octopus, which became Octopus.
Right.
So it was, and then we thought, Octopus, 8 songs, Octopus, 8 songs, and the Octopus sounds cool. So really, it was an idea that we would have the band and a song for each member of the band, just an idea, and then one for the roadies, but ultimately it was discarded and became Octopus based on the music we had rehearsed and written. That was the time, as I said before, when the band was becoming, going through the adolescent period into being kind of a young adult band, that we knew where we were. We were headlining in certain parts of the world. We were selling quite a lot of albums, if you like, and becoming mature,
right.
And having a sound that we knew that was our own, rather than throwing ideas out and not quite being, as focused as we became. A lot of the fans that would come to those shows, some come to see Gentle Giant, would come to see other bands of different ilks. I mean, we toured with the Eagles and Tull and different worlds. I mean, different kinds of bands. So it was a different era. It was a different era where fans would come to see a show which had different kinds of music. It wasn't as fragmented as it is today. I mean, if you like it wasn't, I only listened to pop, or I only listened to hip hop, I only listened to prog. It was a situation in an era where people would listen to music, and music was a driver of the culture. For the most part, all the bands we toured with, whether whoever they were, and there were tons of them. I mean, you name it, Deep Purple, etc., etc. But there were only a very few bands, and everyone got on with each other. That was a period of time when, there was a headliner, but everyone was, cheering each other on. The only band I remembered that were real assholes were the Eagles. They were real scumbags. They wouldn't say hi in the dressing room. They were like, screw you. I hope you die on the stage.
Really? That bad?
Yeah, they were. Yeah, they were. That was that bad. And you could ask the rest of the band. We all felt the same way.
I just wanted to touch on sort of what the dynamic was like, sort of working with your brothers in a band. I mean, I think it was shortly after Octopus that Phil left the band. I just wanted to know what it was sort of like. Were there many arguments, or did you feel a little more comfortable saying things that you wouldn't have said to friends?
Oh, look, certainly with me and Phil. Phil left the band. Obviously, Phil left the band, as you said, after Octopus. And he had his priority was his family. He was the only one married at that point.
Right.
He had 2 kids or 3 kids, and it was very difficult for him, to go on the road for months on end and not be with his family. He would be very tense, understandably so. On reflection, it's something when you go through it, you understand. Having like 2 older adult kids myself. But yes, when we were in the band, that's why he left the band, basically, because he wanted to be with his family,
right.
And rightly so. But however, you're asking about the dynamics between brothers in a band. It's always the same way. It's usually 2 brothers. We had 3 brothers in the band. So really, and this went even back as far back as the Simon Dupree era, Phil and myself would be at each other's throats 24/7.
Right.
To be honest with you, and it was a dynamic that if you weren't on the inside and you didn't know that we were brothers and loved each other, people would be shit scared that we're going to beat each other up.
Right.
But it was that chemistry, and Ray was always a peacemaker, if you like. But the other members of the band would stay away, hoping that we wouldn't be in a sort of a punch up, if you like. But we never were. It was always a dynamic that Phil was the elder brother, and I think he felt that he should be the guy leading the band, and I was the lead singer. So being the lead singer, and I felt I'm the lead guy, So what are you talking about? So it was almost like the lions, the lion pack, if you like, and I'm the younger lion trying to take over, and the older lion saying, "Well, fuck you, I'm the guy that's in charge." So that was a dynamic that continued all the way through until Phil left, of course, and that was it was it was a really bizarre occasion for us, because it was I mean, even though that was it was tough for us as a band when Phil left, because we had started together in years ago, so we had to revamp and rethink. But when he left, it kind of left us in a situation where we thought, well, what the hell do we do now? But we continued, and I think we flourished actually in our way.
Right.
But he flourished too, because he had his family and he's got grandkids, and he's even got great grandkids. So it's great for him, and we're in touch all the time.
Right. That's good. Yeah, I was going to ask about that. Do you keep in touch with everyone still? Is it still sort of regular communication?
Yeah, we do. I mean, yes, we do. I mean, I was, not. I mean, we're not like we were when you're in a band, but certainly, we're in touch with each other. In fact, in October of last year, we had a box set put out called Unburied Treasure.
Oh yeah, I saw that where you guys opened it.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So it was me, Gary, Kerry, and even Malcolm were together, and it was kind of fun to see the guys together. Malcolm was only on one album, of course, but just to be together, and of course during the lockdown period here right now, where we are. I speak to Ray and Phil through House Party. I see Kerry on, etc. And in fact, it's kind of interesting because in 1980, as you know, we broke up the band. But we have done a video, or should I say, a video of Proclamation from The Power and the Glory, where we are virtually a reunited band.
Oh wow!
So that you'll see that within a couple of weeks.
Right.
And you should never say never, but we were together virtually.
Right. And what was that like?
Well, we weren't together literally. We're together doing our little bits and pieces on the screen, and I think you'll see it in a couple of weeks. I think Prog magazine are going to help out. Right. Telling people about this piece. And in fact, we got some, a lot of fans playing on Proclamation, as well as some, good musicians who are great friends of ours, from King Crimson, Yes, Chic, ELO, etc., etc. It's a lot of fun. And so it's a virtual reunion, if you like.
I think you've spoken about this quite a lot, really. Just the sort of Giant for a Day and Civilian Days. Now, this is where the sort of sound of Gentle Giant definitely changed. Now, was this a conscious decision, or did it sort of just happen?
A bit of both. I mean, the obviously conscious decision to do it was real because we recorded it, of course. But certainly, they were conscious about the bands that we were playing with, but we were sort of bagged as this kind of like experimental bands like King Crimson, like Yes, etc. And we realized that and radio and the whole world was changing to more of a song-based media than just album-based. And Yes and Crimson, Crimson, yeah, as well. And bands like Genesis suddenly had hit songs. And we're playing to 2 or 3 nights sold out in the gardens. Meanwhile, we were still playing 1,000, 2,000 seaters, 3,000. So we said, look, let's try something else. And yes, it was kind of a conscious effort. However, at the same time, to be honest, the word progressive means that you progress. You don't stay in one thing. You can't do Acquiring the Taste for 10 or 12 albums. It doesn't make sense, So yeah, we try something different, and if it works, if it works, great. If it didn't work, okay. So you're asking about Giant for a Day. Well, I think in certain respects it worked, but for the most part, it didn't really work because we weren't really that band. We weren't a pop band, or that was the wrong thing. A commercial band, and I think we were trying to be a band who we weren't really meant to be. Mm-hmm. So in the respect that what we tried to do, it didn't really work. Okay, look, that's okay. We tried, and it didn't really work. It wasn't who we were. So, but at least we progressed to try. If you don't try, you'll never know. Again, even in the mid-period, I don't think that The Power and the Glory was anything like Acquiring the Taste.
Yeah,
every album is kind of different. So, having John Weathers in the band was a very, very important factor as well, because he was a real rocker. I mean, he was a rock drummer. And that's one thing I'd like to point out, as if you like, in that, we're bagged in this progressive mode or title or whatever it means. I think we were a rock band. We love to rock. And again, if you see any YouTube videos or had anyone that's looking at you are of an age that saw us play, we were a real rock band. I mean, we weren't like shoe starers. We weren't musicians that went on stage and pretended we were some classical orchestra. We rocked and we enjoyed it and we had fun.
So was it sort of these last two albums, sort of the way they were received by your fans and by the public? Was this sort of the thing that led you to decide to split the band up?
No, not really. I think you've quoted me already as saying that I like Civilian, which I do. I think it's a very good record, and it's very, very much undersung by the sort of the fans of Gentle Giant, who were big fans of the period, which is perhaps 4 or 5 years earlier than this. I think Civilian is a very well constructed album, and I think Inside Out, that song Inside Out itself, is one of our best songs we've written and produced, if you like. How can I put this? I think we were touring. I remember the last tour, and all I can do is reflect on what it was and the feelings that were going in the band. And there was almost like rehearsing for the last tour felt like clocking in for a day job.
Right.
And I think I've said this before, but when something, especially in the creative world, if you like, feels like a job, it's time to say, okay, this is not a good thing to do when you're just clocking in for the money. I understand most people have to do that because that's a livelihood and you have to put bread on the table. But nevertheless, if you're in the creative era, and I think our creativity and our sort of was starting to wane, honestly. We were getting a little bored with touring and everything else. So it was time, and I think we all realized before the tour that okay, we were on the road again. It was like a cycle of, record, rehearse, tour, record, and it became a situation where the creative elements and the sort of and the touring became a chore. And as I said, if a creative thing becomes a chore, it becomes a job. It's time to stop.
So you went from obviously being in Gentle Giant, and then you sort of went to the organizational side of the music industry. What sort of prompted this? Was it your own experience with sort of executives in record companies?
Well, there's 2 or 3 reasons why I did that. Number one is I needed a job. It's pretty, I didn't. Truthfully, I didn't want to. I got it, and I had an opportunities to produce artists and everything else, but it wasn't something I wanted to do. wasn't sure what I wanted to do when we broke the band up. But having had the experience of kind of myself, kind of looking after the band in the last go around, the last 3 or 4 years or longer. We took on management ourselves. We produced the albums. We managed the band. We were kind of DIY in a lot of ways. So I learned about the business, if you like, hands on. So in the respect that it kind of was detrimental to a certain degree for myself anyway, it was probably not a good thing to do. However, going forward to what you're talking about, joining the dark side, if you like, of the business, it was a positive experience because then I could lend my experience of having been in a band since I was at school and having pop hit singles and and playing to 20, 30,000 people as well as, 10 people in an audience. I could lend that experience to artists who I could sign and be part of, and hopefully help them expand and enjoy their career of their own.
And is it true that you were instrumental in signing Bon Jovi, Slipknot, and Nickelback to their record labels?
Yep, it's true, and don't blame me for that. No, there are plenty more, but yeah, I was I was very lucky in that I kind of found myself in a situation when I first joined Polygram. That was the first label I worked for, and Bon Jovi was the first artist I actually signed, and
wow. I
just knew even when he first started and had a song "Runaway" on a LP, which is on the radio. When I met him, he had a personal drive that was unstoppable. You sit down with someone and you think, okay, what is it? He obviously was a great looking kid, if you like, and everything else. And there's a song that was a very, very commercial song, but his personal drive to make it was unstoppable. And what I tried to do is channel that into the band he put together, which became Bon Jovi. Slipknot is another one. I mean, I became fans of this kind of thing. There's in the progressive world, there's I think that Slipknot in certain respects, and certainly Pantera, are as progressive as Gentle Giant in a lot of ways. I mean, I'm a fan of what they've done.
My last question sort of is, do you think you miss playing as Gentle Giant, or do you think you prefer being sort of behind a desk and that sort of aspect of music?
No, I don't, and to both, because again, what I don't want to do, and what I hate to do, and what I hate to be, is someone who lives on their past accomplishments, even though we put things out as Gentle Giant, and revels in the past rather than what's happening today and what's happening in the future. So again, I'm not. That has no meaning or reflection on anyone else. This is me personally, and I think it goes for my brother Ray and probably other people in the band. I don't want to be someone who parodies themselves. So no, I wouldn't want to be doing what we did 40 years ago. That was the last gig in 1980. So we're talking about 40 years ago, because we'd be asked to play the same songs that we did then, and we've moved on from there. It was a chapter in our lives and my life that was fantastic, and you can't even cast it in a way that you can imagine. But it was a chapter, and I've had other chapters in my life. You just mentioned the executive part, which is for the most part great too, but there are negative times as well. What I do miss is what's going to happen in the future. That's what I'm looking forward to, and I'm missing what's going to happen. Let's get out of this pandemic. Let's see what's going to happen in next year or the year after. That's the fun part, to look forward as opposed to back.
Derek, thank you so much for joining me and giving
me your pleasure.
Time. Hey, thanks so much for listening to this episode of Communication Breakdown. Join me next week when I'll be talking to the prog rock band Focus. And you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Hopefully, I'll see you next time. Bye.